Hey everyone, I'm Colette. Welcome to my channel, and today I'm doing a Q&A. I started gathering questions several weeks ago, but then my computer broke down, so now it's here. And I'll start with the easier questions and work my way in. I would love to hear your answers to these questions and your thoughts in the comments, especially if they're different from mine. So I paraphrased these down to a simple question, but I read the whole thing and took that all into consideration in answering these questions. So the first question is, horseshoes above the door, yes or no? Which way up, and do they repel the fae? So horseshoes are traditionally used for luck and protection. The traditional placement for luck is with the open part up so that cup can catch the blessings, so to speak. And that's how I was also taught to hang them for protection, although a lot of people disagree with that. I personally don't work with horseshoes very often or iron very often in general because a lot of the magic I do involves the fae and I don't want to drive them off. Iron tends to do that. Instead, for luck, I make charms like 4-leaf clovers, bay leaves, nutmeg in a bag, a charm bag, and then just hang it over my door. I have a whole video on that. And for protection charm bags instead, I use rosemary's my favorite, but there are many other herbs that you could use. These were all really good questions, and a lot of them I'm going to make full videos on, so I'll just give short answers. And this is one of those ones I want to make a full video on. What would you tell your younger witchy self and my audience? Trust your instincts, try things, mess up, make mistakes, and learn from those mistakes. Don't wait until you're perfect. And the other thing I think is really important to remember is not everyone who says they want to go deep into witchcraft will or actually wants to. And that might include you. Give yourself and others permission to shift as they need to. Be kind to yourself, go slow, be kind to other people you're working in, and let things evolve as they need to. Don't rush into forming a coven. Again, I'm going to make a whole video on this one, but here's the short answer. Books, read lots of books, if that is available to you. I don't have specific ones that I like generally. To me, the ones I like are all very kind of specific about specific topics and paths. I find those ones are a lot better than general witchcraft books. And libraries are really good if you are on a budget and you can request books to your local library. If you have sight impairment or your brain doesn't like to read books, podcasts can be really, really good and informative as well. They're made to give a lot of information on specific topics in a short frame of time. If you've all have found a book that you like that's general, please share it in the comments. Also, I would say work with others, even if it's just a study group. One of the ways that I learned the most in my craft was from working with other people. They all bring different techniques and insights that pushed me. All right, next question. What do you do when a well-planned spell doesn't work? And this is another great question. First, it happens way more often than some of you might think. I know that you know this, the person asked the question. First, spells are influences, not absolute control. They can tip the scale. But what I do when a spell doesn't work is I just kind of go back to the drawing board and I do a little divination. So one thing you might do is pull a card and ask the question, what actions do I need to take to support this spell? And then rewrite your spell based on that. So then the other thing I might do is pull a 3-card spread, and the first one is what energy do I need to embody? So that might work around with calling specific deities, helpers, or animals, or things that you would want to have on your altar when you're doing the spell. And the second one is where is the magical block, and that might lead you to do some kind of releasing, clearing, protection before you try your spell again. And then the third question is, what should I move towards now? And then that is how you maybe rewrite your intention. And you've probably already tried this with your original spell, but I would relook at the magical timing, especially if you get information from the spirit world about removing a block. You might do a 2-phase kind of a spell in different timings using seasons and moon phases, which is what I like to do. Although I do believe you can do magic anytime, but if something's being a little difficult, pull in some outside sources like magical timing. And I do want to say, I don't know what your question was about, but if it was a love spell, they are especially tricky. They fail so often. And here's why, in my opinion, is because they involve another person being willing to step up to the plate when they feel that pull. Even if it's right, they might be hesitant. And part of that is just because our world is so crazy right now, and so many of us are wounded and have fears and scars. And so that can make it really difficult, even if it's a good match. For money magic, if it's about that, one of the things, this is always a big thing for me, is Jason Miller says in one of his books that you have to have enough enchantable paths for resources to reach you. In other words, if you are just kind of being like, I need money, then it will drop from the sky. You will probably get like a one-time gift of some kind, but you need to think about what kind of paths are easiest for money to come to you through and work with that. And I know that most of you are really struggling with that these days. One thing I always add to money spells is I always add the phrase abundance beyond expenses or beyond expenditures to my money workings. How do you know if a spirit is contacting you through dreams or if it is just that I'm an imaginative dreamer? Great question. There is a second part, and that was, I want to know if I'm a medium, if I have that gift. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about semantics, which is debatable, 6 of one, 6 of the other. So I believe that most people get some messages from the spiritual world in their dreams. It sounds like you are getting a good amount, and I would definitely describe that as an intuitive psychic gift that you should develop. For me, the way I define medium is that you get distinct messages from the spirit world that come through for you when you are awake or in trance or going about your day. Things just kind of pop in, and they're definitely messages and information that needs to go somewhere or be applied to someone, or you need to tell someone about it. But you get to define this however it works for you. It sounds like you do have a gift and it's worthwhile honing it. And so one of the ways I would suggest doing that is to write things down. Over time, you might see patterns in terms of determining which ones are the most valid and what they mean and what they relate to. Sometimes that takes months. For me, magical info dreams often feel a little different than regular dreams. They feel a little bit more brighter, more unusual. I can't easily assign a problem or a life problem to them and say, oh yeah, that's kind of feels similar to how I feel when XYZ happens. To me, that's a sign that that is an intuitive psychic dream. And another thing that happens for me is, especially if there are specific allies that are trying to come to you through your dreams, you might feel that energy really staying with you through the day. Often it feels like there's a being that's still with you. It's like a little cloak that you walk around with, and it's like it kind of holds you. That's true for me. I don't know if that's true for others. And so you might look into researching dream work in books, researching astral travel, or lucid dreaming to hone that gift. And you can also try mugwort using that. How do you identify and connect with your spirit guides? So you probably know this, but they're always around, even from the time you're a very small child. And it's just as adults, we forget how to see them and talk to them and work with them. So one way that I work with this is start by relearning the process of communication and starting with things that are relatively simple to contact and work up from there. Also ones that are safer to contact and that you can have some discernment around. So these are things like plants, animals, or ancestors. And as a child, if you think about it, you might always remember that you had a specific animal that you liked a lot or pretended that you were, or that it hung out with you, or maybe you had a stuffy toy of that particular animal and it was very real to you. That's one way to think about it. Plants, those are ones that draw you in. They feel special to you. And I know that you're asking about allies and guides. Where's your team? The ones that are going to advise you and help you and support you. But you have to make pathways for them to get to you and learn the skills of telling who is for you and who is not, which is why I recommend starting with plants, animals, etc. And I do have a whole video on this. And the way I would start is thinking about those animals and plants that you do already have an affinity for. You don't have to be like, but are they my ally? You can just be like, do I have an affinity for them? If you do, start making offerings to them. You can do that outside and it can be very simple, just like water, cordials that you've specially made, tea, a little spirits or alcohol, and then say something like, this is for my allies, known or unknown, those who have my best interest at heart, which is always, to me, a good phrase to put in there. And then you can also do that indoors if you choose, and have a small candle that you light occasionally and put your offering there. And once you're getting good with that, I would use divination to find out which ones are special to you, which ones you can consistently rely on to show up, and then start making that offering and say, I invite spirit guides and helpers to come to me, those who have my best interest at heart and no others, and start to use some divination to just kind of sort out which ones are really right for you. I really like having a pendulum or some kind of yes-no system to back that information up, just to be like, is this ally guide who's showing up for me really have my best interest at heart? And I do, as I said, have a whole video on that, and I have videos on making use of pendulum as well. I think if you're working by yourself, that's the safest way to do it. Start simple, work up, you reach out first, back it up with a simple yes-no divination. The next one is a super fun one for me, and it's, where would you go to deepen your practice if you could travel anywhere for a week? Love this question. I know exactly where I would go. So it'd basically be where my ancestors lived, and I would go with the purpose of connecting with my deep history ancestors, the ones that were Iron Age or earlier. So I would go to Ireland and I'd visit the ancient stone monument sites, burial mounds, stone circles, especially the ones that are aligned with the seasons, and just go there to feel what the energy of that magic was like. I learned a lot when I went to Newgrange because the energy in there was so powerful, and I wasn't expecting that because I was in with a bunch of tourists snapping pictures, but the energy was so powerful. I thought to myself, oh my God, as witches, we are in kindergarten in some ways compared to what the really early ancestors could do. So I would go and study that energy. And then I would also go to England too and go to the same places. And in both those places, I would also ask my ancestors in the burial mounds, what has been forgotten about witchcraft and magic? Because they did things completely differently than we do. France is also on my list. just because my guides would really love it if I moved there. So someday I'd like to visit. And Wales. And the reason I'd love to go to Wales to deepen my spirituality is I remember reading a few mythology books from the story cycles of Wales when I was really young, like 10, 11, 12. And I didn't quite catch them. I felt like there was something there that was a really important message for me that I didn't understand. And further time and research has not revealed what that is. So I feel like I would like to go to Wales and just be open to what the magic would tell me and what the next phase of my journey is. If you had to pare back your magical tools just to the essentials, what would they be? So I would say candles, herbs, my cauldron, and small handmade brooms, and maybe some magical wells. And I talked about that in a couple videos I have, and I'll link that below. Those would be the basic things I couldn't do without. Don't ask me to try and narrow down my list of herbs. That would be impossible. Okay, the next one comes from a very experienced witch who's a regular viewer here, and here's their question. I've done all the cleansing, smoke, steam, bells, offerings, nothing, but a heavy energy keeps returning to my house, and the house recently had a renovation that was kind of messy and a complex human history. What now? So this question was a lot longer, and I paraphrased this one down quite a bit. So thank you for sharing all that information. It definitely helped. So my basic hit on it is that you need to try and do some more work around figuring out what is going on and address that. And I have some thoughts I'll share here. My guess is that it's multifaceted. Some type of persistent spirit haunting, something that has become bigger over time from the complex human interactions, and then it got stirred up by all the renovations. It's been sitting in the walls maybe for decades, or under the house in the land for maybe hundreds of years. And if it ends up being a land spirit or spirit of place, that's really hard. So I would say if you have the skills, do some divination and just say, is it a this kind of a spirit? Is it a this kind of spirit? And see if you can get some info there, and then that will help you narrow down what you need to do. If it was a land spirit, there's not a lot that you can do about that other than like keep clearing out your house and then putting up some much stronger protection around. I'll talk about that more in a minute. I don't have a great answer for that one. Usually if that's the case, people have to move, which probably isn't an option for you, because if it was, you would have already done it. So I also want to say, it sounds more persistent than a ghost, simple ghost. Those are really pretty easy to get rid of unless they've gotten a lot bigger, which maybe this one did. So you're kind of trying to decide, is it a human energy? Is it a spirit of place? Those kinds of things. And since the heavy feeling lifts when you leave the house, it's obviously tied to the house and not connected to you. It's not a haunting or a curse on you, so you can rule that out. The thing I would mostly recommend first, if you have access, is getting a skilled psychic or magical practitioner to come in and read the space directly. And this person also kind of mentioned that there's the theory, which I believe in, that when you start doing more intensive magic or pick it back up, or when you're beginning, you get shinier to this spirit world and it attracts them. And I believe that's true. However, I don't think that's a factor in this case, really, because if that was the case, it would probably follow you around, and it doesn't when you leave the house. So here's what I've done when I had to help with that. And I've had a lot of success with gathering groups of friends that are witches. Again, might not be available to you, but then you can get information together and do a very deep cleansing throughout the whole house. And I would also ask your spirit guides, either on your own or with this group, if there are any protective allies that can stand with you to push those spirits out. That's a very old kind of thing that people used to do in older charms and spells, is say, hey, you, enemy, I'm hanging with this big, powerful, badass, protective ally. Go away, because this is what this ally does to its enemies. And so that can be very, very helpful. Might be difficult with a land spirit, but you could probably move it out of the house. So you don't want to go at it like, hey, I got this badass spirit, but just like ask the protective spirit to help you move, and you all as a group or yourself push that energy starting in the center, spiraling out, and try and push that energy out of the house as you're just finishing up cleaning, and then immediately put up wards, amulets, symbols, sigils, herb charms. I would also paint things with ash or with invisible kind of chalk or water, protective herbs on the house, because I think at this point it might be something that's on the land. If it's not, you might get it to cross. I also, if you know anybody that's really good with helping spirits to cross over, you can do that. And that's only though if it's a human, which I don't think it is. I think it's bigger than that. If it's a human that has gotten bigger, but maybe you could try that and just see if you know someone who's good at crossing people over. Good hard one. I like that question. Any spells to quiet a noisy neighbor? Oh my God, I hear this one so often. And first I would say it's always helpful to speak with them first if you can. Even if they're non-responsive, they'll often quiet down later, if it feels safe to do so. And in this case, this person did. So then go to magic. Level 1, make a charm with calming and protective herbs. So I would add lavender and chamomile. They both are mildly protective. I don't think of them as super strong, but they're very calming and soothing and clearing. I would add rosemary for protection and clearing. And rosemary is really robust. It's also pretty friendly, so it's not likely to aggravate the neighbor in any way. And then the fourth one I would add would be blue vervain. And that one has more banishing energies, a little stronger, helps clear energy away, may dissipate some of the energy of this. And I would then make a charm asking each herb to bring its properties to the spell and put it in some kind of container, and then bury it on the property line or hang it discreetly somewhere on the property line. And I did want to say about blue vervain that is as close to banishing as you can get without working with any of the poisonous, baneful herbs, which can be really tricky if you don't have good protocols or training in working with poisonous herbs. The next thing I would do is I would call on deity if you work with deity. If you haven't worked much with deity, you can try calling on the spirit of the earth itself. Earth spirits, earth deities really get it about home and sanctuary. So I would just make something like a prayer, a simple request, stating your need, telling them why you need this, that you need sanctuary, you need safety, and this is disturbing the peace, and can they help you move this energy away in some fashion that is not harmful to anyone. And then you can go from there by giving them an offering. The other thing that I would do is if you work with Hecate at all, I feel like Hecate is awesome at protecting houses, protecting spaces, boundaries, and is kind of a badass. So what I would do again is prepare some kind of statement about what you need. Offer her some honeyed wine with cinnamon in it, maybe some bread and cheese, light a candle, and ask for help with harm to none. That's what I would try. If that didn't work, maybe try talking to the neighbors and seeing if you can get some kind of group thing going, and then do a little spell with the charms as backup. What's changed the most in mainstream witchcraft since you began practicing? Oh my God, so much. I would say there's a couple things that really stand out to me. And the biggest one is that people are really sharing more information and learning more about what witchcraft information is truly historical, how long it's been around, and how much of it is actually modern reinterpretations or modern reconstructionism. And then the other big change that I see is when I started, it was really deity focused, specifically lots of goddess worship and ritual work. And that's still here, but now witches are moving away so much from just doing only celebrating the holidays and moons, etc., and doing practical magic, like practical spell working, spirit work, and folk magic, which I really welcome because, you know, it takes a lot of energy to learn how to do a ritual, and often it's not easy to do if you're working solo. Let me know in the comments what you think about these questions and what your opinions and advice are. I also would really like to hear which of these questions you would like to see made into a full video. And so, until next time, stay safe and be well.